Um, Hello all. I'm Stephen Parr, work for Nstrat Analytics, and we handle the natural gas contracting and procurement for the group. Quick agenda here. I know some of you are new to this, so we have a slide on natural gas 101, deregulation. Try to explain to you why purchasing energy is so much more difficult than paying your utility bill all of a sudden. A few program stats and benefits. And we'll take a look at what the market's been doing up until this point and the program performance as a reflection of that. And then we'll wrap it up taking a look at what's the market doing in the forward curve and how's that going to translate into our pricing for our next contract cycle. So the deregulated landscape for natural gas is fairly simple. There were some deregulation efforts back in the mid 80s to early 90s to open the market up, meaning essentially we can buy certain components of our natural gas bill from a third-party supplier. So the utility was forced to essentially give up the natural gas source and transmission portion and unbundle that in their tariff to allow for third-party marketing to handle those particular aspects of natural gas delivery. Now they'll still get their share, and then distribution. They'll still get a chunk of what you pay on your gas invoice for essentially the last mile delivery, the local pipe infrastructure to your meter. But the two big components, the commodity and the transmission, we actually purchase now from a third-party supplier. And we do that under an index plus product, meaning that we buy our commodity at the prevailing index price, and the supplier, our chosen supplier, just goes out to the market on our behalf and at our direction and procures that for us at the going commodity rate. Natural gas forward market is extremely liquid, it's extremely transparent, and it's a very cost-effective way to purchase natural gas commodity, and with enough size as an aggregate group like this can bring, we can just go out to the commodity index and secure that price through our supplier at our discretion. The middle portion there is really the competitive piece of this, the transmission piece. Different suppliers in the state will have different interests in serving different areas. They'll have different capacity rights and different pipelines, and that will be reflected in a differential in pricing. So when we go to market, we really are just requesting that transmission basis price, essentially the cost of bringing natural gas from the source, predominantly from the Gulf of Mexico to eastern Pennsylvania, and the suppliers will compete on that portion of the bill. And you can see the cost breakdown there. 50% of the cost comes straight off the commodity index. 20% is that basis price that we will compete the different marketers for delivery into Pennsylvania, and the last 30% still goes to the utility. So that's pretty much the landscape and the cost breakdown of the different components that we're buying under the program here. Quick stats, we've been doing this since 2009. We've got 65 member schools and 120 accounts, which roll up to 275 MMBTU per year. This is currently our fourth cycle. Our current contract is 3 years. We've been typically going in 2-year cycles, but since the gas has bottomed out in really 2014, we've been going longer term to take advantage of the low commodity prices for as long as possible. Current suppliers, UGI, Energy Services, and like the electric side, the termination of the contract will be next June of 2018. So a couple aggregate benefits. Al went over some of these in his presentation, but I wanted to speak to just a couple that pertain to the gas contract and specifically. Really, the short story is, acting together, you can approach the market en masse and demand certain concessions that you wouldn't get individually. That can be manifest both in price reduction and also in certain qualitative things, contract benefits and settlement provisions. A couple of those, as they pertain to gas, is aggregate balancing. Individually, you're very likely to get essentially what's called a 10% swing product, meaning your contract volumes are bound by 10% up and down allowance. And if you go beyond that, then you are forced to settle at an off-contract rate. Our contract does away with that. There is no settlement under our contract. It's however much you consume or how little consume, you'll get our contract price for that. We have a fairly generous drops on ads allowance. Alone, you're very likely to face liquidation charges if you drop an account out of contract. Our current contract allows for accounts coming in and going out of the program just as a matter of course, just as a matter of trying to manage 120 accounts in and out of the program. We have a fairly good allowance to allow us to do that without the specter of liquidation. And while for many of you, fixed requirement services is just the thing, we secure a very low or as low price as possible for as long as possible, lock that rate, and provide budget certainty as a result. We have other contract provisions that allow different types of products if you're interested in. Typically, that boils down to exposure to index. So if you would like to curtail in response to a high pricing event, or if you're capable of fuel switching, going to fuel oil or some other natural gas substitute, then we have a provision within the contract that would allow you to do that and be settled on a different structure than the full requirements that a bulk of the accounts use. There are certain reductions, there's certain economies of scale, especially in buying the pipeline capacity in blocks of 10,000 MMBTU scales that you really don't see individually. But like the electric, we take pains to avoid cross subsidies between accounts. There are different costs in delivery to different parts of the state and for different profiles. And a term of art is the price needs to follow the profile. So we have several different pools that accounts of different utility service areas and the different account classes will fall into and receive the pricing that is relevant to where they are. So again, by doing this, we try to reduce the cost and use the bulk purchasing benefit and contract negotiation leverage for all, but ensure that each account receives the pricing that it deserves based on, again, its account class and the utility that is being served under, and the various costs that are attributed to delivery to different parts of the state. The last couple points there just really boil down to the time is money aspect. It's far easier for a supplier to deal with PAISBOA under a single contract and a single transaction than 65 times over again for each individual member, and that efficiency, that cost reduction should manifest in a lower price for us. This next slide is really a 20-year walk through the natural gas wholesale market. There's about a tail through the 90s there where natural gas was pretty much a $2 product. Back in 2000 to 2001, there was a severe drought in California, which drove natural gas prices above $5 for the first time. Natural gas was dispatched to replace the loss in hydro generation that they had out there, which caused a demand spike. And then 2003 to 2005, there was an escalation with oil that's pretty much follows the Gulf War, or the second Gulf War, and the most commodities escalated over that time, culminating in 2005, and that was a Hurricane Katrina, followed quickly by Hurricane Rita a couple of weeks later, which laid waste to a lot of the natural gas infrastructure out in the Gulf. So that spike reverted back to $8 for a time and then hit again in 2008, and that mirrors the financial crisis. There was a quick flight to commodities as safe harbor before we started going into recession in 2009. Stabilized briefly at 550, which is pretty much where we were going into this. And then where we are today, 2001 and forward, is really a product of the shale gas production. So shale gas can be produced 375 to 450, and we've oscillated up and down around that price point ever since natural gas started supplying on the margin. Right now, we're actually a little bit below that, and we're actually seeing kind of an interesting supply anomaly coming out of the oil patch. There's a lot of shale plays for oil production, producing natural gas as a byproduct. So that's essentially coming into the market free. And there's enough of that happening that it's actually driving the price below the shale gas production cost. So this is probably a temporary window of sub 350 wholesale gas that we're glad to be in the market to take advantage of, since while the oil patch is fairly unstable, this sympathetic play in natural gas pricing is probably not long lived. So we're anxious to take advantage of it while it's there on the market. The next slide is really just a tail of the graphic you were looking at before. This is 2012 to 2017, about 5 years. And a couple other lines on here to try to track program performance. Now, the blue squiggly line there is the market, just like on the previous graph. But the solid blue line is really our ultimate benchmark, and that is the purchase gas costs coming from the utility. So if you're not engaged in this program, if you're just buying through the utility, that is the price that you would see. So at the very least, we'd like a comfortable margin above, or rather below, the do nothing option of buying through the utility, and we've been able to maintain that through the program on the order of I think the average is about 56 cents. So call that about 20% on a $3 commodity price. The different contracts are reflected there on the dash green lines. So we have two contracts on there, one incepting back in 2012 and the other incepting back in 2014. And there's a pattern here. We've been entering the market at buying opportunities ahead of the current contract termination, about a year ahead of time. And the blue line, the blue squiggly line there, reflecting the market, it's not a benchmark per se, and that we're trying to beat the market. It's more just trying to inform, are we making good purchasing decisions as far as when we buy our contract and for what term we're buying it for. Back in 2012, we saw the market subside, and when we bought out a year, about 12 months ahead of time, and managed to shave off that peak there we see in the middle of the graph. Saw the same event again in 2014 for the 15 through 18 contract, our current contracts. Bought it at a dip there, and the market has since been up and down. But this brings us to current day, where we're also in a very good buying opportunity about 12 months ahead of time, and advocating a similar strategy that we approach the market sooner than later, and try to take advantage of these depressed prices for our next contract cycle. This is a different look of a similar graph that Provident had shown. It's the forward curve, and again, like electricity, we see an uptick there on the 2018 pricing, and then the U-shape of the backwardization curve coming down into 2019-20 before slowly escalating beyond 2021. The reason for the shape of the curve is that there was a bit of a storage deficiency coming out of summer of last year, which is not filled over the winter. It was a fairly mild 16 to 17 winter, but we're a bit behind the curve as far as natural gas storage going into the summer. So it's got the near terms bid up a little bit before we come back down into our ideal buying range, which is $3 commodity. And what we're looking at here is the commodity plus the basis price. So the 550 is currently what we have under contract. We see a nice step down there into our next buying range, into about 475. So roughly a 75% discount in the current market condition for our next contract cycle. And just some thoughts going forward. Again, we see this pricing at this current level as being somewhat of an anomaly, as the bit of a combination of low demand coming out of the recession and the sympathetic gas production coming out of the oil patch. A couple troubling things on the horizon as we've slowly the economy is improving. We've seen upticks in demand pretty much month after month from 2014, which is starting to have an effect on the price from that point forward. And also, there's a fairly significant event happening in natural gas exports. Pretty much up until now, our ability to export natural gas, LNG, off essentially liquefying natural gas, putting it on ships and sailing it to Europe or the Far East has been pretty limited, on the order of 1 to 1.5 BCF per day. With that perspective, as a nation, we consume about 80 BCF per day on average. So, maybe a little more over 1% of the market. The facilities are expanding and coming online pretty rapidly starting this year. We're now up to 2.5, and by the end of the year, there's some predictions that we should be up to 8 BCF per day, and that's suddenly 10% of the market. And that is certainly enough to, that is certainly enough of a margin to start driving the price upward as a supply constraint. So, we see pricing being extremely attractive right now. In a historical perspective, they are as low as they have been in the 20-year history. But we are seeing some upticks both on the demand and the supply side as far as exports go, to encourage us to look at our next contract today, to start into the market as soon as possible, to try to secure this going forward, while the prices are still attractive.
Thank you, Steve.
I'll pitch it back to you.
Yep, you want to send me the screen and I'll pick it up. I don't see any overt questions in the chat box. So just let me make a couple of points for the benefit of the crowd. I know it's almost a year out, and I waited until now. The market is at relatively very strong lows. And that's why you and I have been getting all these calls with all these claims about people being able to save money. That ability is largely based on timing, in my opinion. The experts have distinguished themselves, and with you, in talking about what is probably your largest individual cost in your operation, other than staff, employee salaries, and benefits. So I think this is worth the time and attention that we've given it today in something less than an hour on such an important subject. I think that you understand why we think it's important to have time on our side, which is the reason that we're coming to you now and saying we think this is a good time to consider acting. And you'll be hearing from me about that possibility and asking you to complete and turn around an election form for your school so that we can begin to move forward. I will be happy to take questions from you all at any time. Just send me a note. We will take a look at your individual schools where that seems appropriate, if it is for you. Most importantly, I'm grateful for everyone's participation today. We had almost 25 people on the call at one point, and there was a lot of information exchanged, which I hope will, among other things, give you a kind of a personal indication of what we have been dealing with at the committee level relative to the expertise that comes to the table on your behalf. So thank you very much for attending. We will edit the recording a little bit. That'll take us a day or two, and we'll put it up on the site, and I'll have the election forms out to you probably at some point early next week. And please feel comfortable with, certainly contacting me at any time. We're here to support you, and I hope the program and our discussion about it has proven that to your satisfaction. Thanks so much for joining us, and I wish you all a pleasant afternoon.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you, teammates. I appreciate your help.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.